tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled are Kristin Stone, the creator and producer of the stage play Inside Private Lives, and Dr. Michael Zakian, an art historian who is the director of the Fred Weisman Museum of Art at Pepperdine University in Malibu. Chicago native Kristin Stone was on the stage at the age of 8 in The Sound of Music. She was at the local high school, but she went on to earn a Bachelor of Arts, at Syracuse University. She honed her skills in the theater companies and trained in classes stressing voiceover, script analysis, improv. And you've seen her on TV, in film, and on the stage. Kristin, besides all that experience acting, why did you decide to create this DC thing? Something in DC, was that the beginning of creating things?
Well, no, but it was definitely one of the highlights as a producer. We brought together 9 mostly equity theater companies, came together for a 24-hour period.
Oh, is that what you did?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us what it was called.
It's
a day?
Play in a Day. And it was part of a literary festival that's very popular in Bethesda, Maryland, which is just outside of D.C. And they had never worked with the idea of the playwright as a literary spotlight. So I brought to them the idea of let's highlight the creative process that we have in stage for theater. So,
but you've been acting. Why did you decide to go into this other aspect?
Well, that goes back even further. I mean, although you knew about The Sound of Music, I'm quite impressed. You do your research. But actually, when I started professionally performing outside of, as a full-time career, I started producing and creating at the same time. It's one thing to audition and hope to get work, as you do as a performer. But there's something really empowering about being able to create the work that you do.
Is there a different aspect to it? Is it something different that you take at school? I mean, what motivates you to do that? Are you afraid you're not going to get the part, so you do something else?
No, I think it more or less, when you are a performer, when you are someone who likes to create, you will create. You need to create. That is just something that inside you, whether you're doing it for friends and family, when you're a child, to as an adult, you are, at least I was, always creating and looking for ways to share what I create with others.
Well, you also worked at Second City in L.A.
Well, I produced a show called The Boob Tube.
Is Second City the same Second City as in
Chicago? That's right.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
But there's an LA division?
That's right.
Okay.
And the show that I produced and created called The Boob Tube, and that's television, that's another word, but we, again, brought together for this show sketch talent, writing and improv and performers and directors. And we would put them on stage for one night, and they would bring parodies of television shows.
Oh, that's what it was.
And so it was a little bit the Carol Burnett Show meets the Gong Show meets Mad TV, and the audience got to decide on the best sketch every night, and then they would win the Boob Tube prize.
How did you cast it? How do you cast those kind of things?
Well, in that case, I didn't. I produced it, but we took submissions. In fact, I even got submissions as far away as the United Kingdom.
Really?
From writers who would submit their parodies, and then I would match them up with local talent here, or directors here, or writers and actors, and we put them together, or sketch groups themselves would come in.
But did you you did a lot of improv. Because sketch is kind of part of that whole thing.
Well, sketch is written. I mean, a lot of times you improv ideas that help you to write.
But sketch is written.
And develop the characters
I
and
see.
so forth. Yes.
And improv?
Well, improv is
Improv.
it's extemporaneous. It's on the spot. It's oftentimes reacting with an audience, which is a lot like the show that I've currently created and produced.
So we're going to get to that, which is in Private Lives,
Right.
Inside Private Lives.
That's right.
But the best of boob tubes.
Yes, the
you
best
went
of
on.
boob tube. Well, we always had a winner for each of our boob tubes. So we
I was thinking boob
boob
tube.
tube. Yes. Well, that's okay.
I haven't called the TV the boob tube for so long.
And we had a winner every night. We put on about 8 sketches, and the audience would choose the winner. And so we had about 6 or 7 of these, and then for the best of the boob tube, we brought back all the winning sketches to have the top sketch.
So that was on the stage at Second City,
right.
L.A., Los Angeles.
Yes.
Which I guess led to Inside Private Lives, which sounds so fascinating.
Well, thanks. I have to say, it exceeds even my expectation.
It's played in L.A. before, though. It's now playing
right.
in South Pasadena, but it played in L.A. for a while.
Right. Well, we originated it with I had this idea, and I thought, let's try it out.
So tell us about it.
And well, essentially what it is it's in one evening, you meet several controversial characters from the 20th century, all who've passed on, but who had irrational ideas. They may be rationally minded people, but had irrational ideas. And these public figures, well, we take you inside their private lives to an imaginary moment in time during the height of their controversy.
So tell us about one. Tell us, or give us a few names.
Sure. Well, for instance, I portray Kristin Jorgensen,
I see, on
who
the,
you can
on the
see.
poster, right.
That's right.
Is this it?
That's her. That's it, yes. And she was probably the most widely recognized in the 1950s for having sex reassignment surgery. She's transgendered female, and she was actually became the darling of Hollywood in the 1950s. And but she didn't mean for that to happen. It was meant to be a very private affair. So we bring her back. We bring back Marge Schott.
And you play her. You play Christine.
That's right.
How did you research her?
Well, she wrote an autobiography.
So you read that?
Yes, and there's also video and interview, wonderful media clips, as well as other people who've written about their experiences with her. And, so researching all of our actors.
Did she look like this? Do you wear a wig?
Yes, I wear, yes.
And does she wear strapless clothes to show that she's like very feminine?
She was very feminine. She was all woman. She always was. Since she was 3 years old, she knew she felt like a girl, and very much.
So who are some of the other characters?
Well, we have Marge Schott, who was the outspoken owner of the Cincinnati Reds, who was censured from baseball in the 90s. We have David Koresh, who you may remember from the cult leader of the Branch Davidians in Waco.
And so who picks the characters?
Well, the director, the actor, the director, and myself, we sit together and we go over a list of possibilities.
Oh, you do. So people are all bringing things together to the pot?
Well, our creative team sort of, and it's, it's sort of sad to say, but we do come up with some people, and then we Google them, and we see, oh, they're still living. That
people that you want to talk about.
But and I certainly mean for them to still be living. But the reason we like to choose people who've passed on is there's something really magical about being able to have an opportunity to have a conversation with these people again, when you won't be able to hear anything new from them and about their story.
But one thing that Inside Private Lives does is it's interactive. How do you make it interactive?
Well,
so let's take Christine, because that's what you do. How do you make that interactive?
Well, Christine, in this particular piece, they're always based in.
So it's just one person on stage
right.
giving their. I see.
You spend about 15 minutes with each character. In one evening, you may meet 6 different characters at different time periods. So you may meet King Edward, who abdicated the throne for his love for Wallace Simpson, the American divorcee, in the 1930s. And then you may meet Christine in the late 1950s. And in this case, We've set her it's coming up on the 10th anniversary of her surgeries. And she was good friends with all types in Hollywood, as I mentioned. And in this particular instance, we have her set at the Playboy offices. And she had hoped to have a centerfold in Playboy. So, of course, even for Playboy, it was a bit radical. And although they may have entertained the idea with her privately when it came down to the 11th hour.
So you're costumed.
So she is, and she's come hoping to
Each
celebrate.
Each character is in a costume.
Yes. And you all in the audience are Playboy executives. And
I see. So you give the audience
they always have a role.
A role.
in the private life of that particular character.
And that's called breaking the fourth
wall. But where our show is different, I mean, people have broke the fourth wall in theater before, but in this case, giving the audience a role and a viewpoint. They have a diametrically opposing viewpoint to the character. And in my case, with Christine Jorgensen, she wants to be the centerfold, and they say, well, the audience says, that's too much for even us. She spends the next, 15 minutes with the audience trying to convince them that she's woman enough, even for Playboy.
And do I say, no, you're not, your legs aren't right? I mean,
But are you going to say that when you look at me? When
No,
I'm
but
dressed
what would
like
I
that?
say?
Exactly.
What would I say
But
to you?
You might say, Christine, Playboy is about the ultimate vision of a woman.
Right.
Or it's about, with Mr. Vargas, who's famous for the pinups, he liked to have the girl next door image. And Christine, maybe you're not the girl next door.
So does it change because of your audience? Or does it change because of every time?
Every time.
And so that's the improv part of your
Absolutely.
part, right?
Our show is a dialogue with the audience, and the audience is the scene partner, and we never know what they're going to say and how they're going to respond.
So that theater is in South Pasadena.
That's right.
And James Reynolds, who's an actor.
Right. James and Lisa Reynolds are co-producers of the show, and it's a beautiful theater. It's their 10th season. It's a wonderful location. We couldn't be more happy to be there.
You're right off the freeway.
Right.
So it's easy to get there.
Very right off. We talked about that. Off
is.
the 110 or the 134. Both are easy, and
it's so great, it sounds so interesting. It could go on for years, couldn't it?
Well, gee, do you have some wood? Let's knock on it. Yes, we'd love that.
Kristin, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks for watching this part of our show. We'll be right back with Museum Director Michael Zakian. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back. Art historian, curator, lecturer, Michael Zakian was born and raised in New York. He studied art history at Columbia University, went on to Rutgers, where he earned a master's writing about Barnett Newman and a PhD. Was your PhD with Willem de Kooning? Willem de Kooning. Yeah. And Michael came to California and spent 10 years as the curator at the Palm Springs Desert Museum, and then went on to be the director of the Fred Weisman Museum at Pepperdine in Malibu. This sounds like a TV show from, a California show, from the desert to the sea.
Exactly.
Is that what you did?
Someone once said, "Oh, you've lived in the worst places, Palm Springs and Malibu." So.
The worst,
yeah,
but
exactly.
like the best,
yeah.
right? How did that happen? Why did you go to Palm Springs?
Oh, it was chance. I mean, I came out to California for probably the worst reason why guys do things. It was a girlfriend.
Of course.
There was no reason for me to come out, but I came out right after the Olympics, so that was like September '84.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been here ever since.
And you went to Palm Springs, where...
That was my first job at a graduate school.
Is it? Well, it was a great museum. It
is
a great museum.
And it's changing and growing. In fact, when I was there, it was part art, part natural science.
I remember that.
And they recently did away with the entire natural science wing, so now it's all art, and they're doing some amazing things out there.
So you curated some wonderful shows there.
I did. Probably the best was the Agnes Pelton exhibition, who was a kind of a California counterpart to George O'Keeffe.
So how did you concentrated all, even though you were writing and interested in the abstract expressionists, when you came to California, which is what I think a curator should do and a museum director, is concentrate on California people.
And it was a whole process of education because, you know, there is very much an East Coast, West Coast kind of division. And back east, I think the only California artists I knew of were Sam Francis, Richard Diebenkorn, Ed Ruscha.
Exactly.
That was about it. And then when I got out here, I realized that there's a whole other art world, which I had to learn about.
But that's part of your historian background, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I enjoy doing. I mean, there are some curators that I think see themselves focused more on cutting edge, on what's going on now, and I am more of a historian. I like looking at, you know, where we were 10 years ago, or looking at how did we get to this point today.
But also, and then the people who are working in those areas, which are the California people, because you're here, right? And if you've taught at different places, so I'm sure when you've gone to these other schools, you've concentrated on those.
Well, you know, actually, I've only lived in New York and here. So,
is that it?
Yeah, I'm just a coastal guy.
So how'd you get to Malibu from the desert?
Well, it's actually that artist I mentioned before, Agnes Pelton. I had organized this exhibition. It was the first retrospective since her death in '61. And Pelton did these kind of nature-based abstractions like O'Keeffe's, but they were more spiritual. She might have a star up above and a flower down below.
Where did she live?
Cathedral City.
She lived down there.
Yeah, she lived there from 31 to 61. And actually, I'm working on a project right now with the Orange County Museum of Art. They're doing an exhibition called Illuminations, which is Georgia O'Keeffe, Agnes Pelton, and 2 other desert painters, which is opening next year. And I'm writing an essay on O'Keeffe and Pelton.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Were they the same age?
Agnes was actually about 5 years older.
But they still came from the same milieu.
They studied with the same teacher, Arthur Dow. They had friends in common, although I don't think they ever met. Agnes was painfully shy, and I think that's one reason why her career, she was very much of a recluse, very much someone who kept to herself, and her career just never really took off. She painted for herself.
Well, you wrote about de Kooning, and you wrote about Newman. Did you ever meet them?
No. Although I was just in the Hamptons with my wife this past summer for the first time, and I got to go to the de Kooning studio.
Yes, because he was there, right?
He was living in the Hamptons, and he died, I think, 95, 96. But the studio was not open to the public, so I had to pull some strings to get in. But we were given a tour by his daughter, Lisa de Kooning, which was very special. Yeah, and she's about my age, so we kind of had a nice rapport.
But so you could have had a chance to meet him. I mean, did you think that there was a possibility when you're writing your thesis in college?
Yes, I asked, but the problem was that by that point in his life, I think he already began to suffer from Alzheimer's.
Oh, what about Barney?
And they didn't want me. No, Barney died in 1970. And
so it was too early.
That was too early. So.
But de Kooning was starting to get sick at that time.
Yeah.
Do you address any of those things when you write your thesis? How do you?
Things like that are hard. Personal issues like that you really can't prove. I mean, you could kind of discuss or hint at, but it's really hard to come up with any definitive conclusions.
And since they were so foremost in your life, did you ever use their work in shows that you curated or put together?
Well, yeah, mostly in group shows.
In group shows, that's what I meant.
Shows. Yeah.
But you were able to do that.
Indeed.
So you've taught at Pepperdine, you've taught at Redlands, you taught at UC San Bernardino.
And at Rutgers.
And at Rutgers. So when I started thinking about Redlands and San Bernardino, I was thinking you must have been teaching when you were in Palm Springs.
I was. And commuting. And commuting, yeah.
So do you concentrate on contemporary or historical? What are you thinking of now?
A little bit of both. Well, like the new show that I'm working on that we have coming to the Weisman is very contemporary. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
This is a work by Carolyn Berry Kleefeld, who...
We have it here.
And we have this wonderful painting here called Mountain Impromptu. And the exhibition is called Visions from Big Sur. And Carolyn Kleefeld actually grew up here in Santa Monica and Beverly Hills, and even lived in Malibu in the 70s. But then in 1980, moved to Big Sur. And you know, she's an artist who draws from nature but doesn't copy nature. And I think in this painting here, Mountain Impromptu, you see that she's really drawing upon the rhythms of nature.
Here's another one, an abstract piece. This
But
is
that one's called actually Celestial Mountain, and you can see it looks like a mountain arising.
That's what I was
from,
looking.
yeah,
The same feeling of what you
and
were
she
talking about.
lives on this wonderful property high on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. She's about 500 feet above the ocean with amazing views in all directions.
But she doesn't. Does she paint ocean pictures?
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
No.
No, she paints from within. She paints very spiritual work. She paints kind of her subjective responses to
Here's
her
another
environment.
one, right?
That one's really sweet. Yeah. There's another side of her work. Besides these very powerful abstractions, she's also done a series of paintings that are more poetic and lyrical, even fairy tale-like. Like the painting that you're
Like
holding
this, yes.
has, it's called Spying Through Time, and you have all these fantastic creatures, animals, people, kind of, you know, merging with one another and coming out of the clouds.
What medium does she use?
Oh, you name it. She likes mixed medium. She's an artist who very much works in terms of process. So it's not so much the finished product that she's focused on, but the process of discovery, the process of creating new shapes. So she will usually use a number of different media within a single work.
Did she take formal classes?
She did in UCLA, but I think it really doesn't have much to do with the work that she's creating.
Has she had exhibits? Because, you know, none of us can ever know every painter.
Exactly.
And we don't know the work of painters. We tend to say, so-and-so's successful because they've gone to this school, they've been in this gallery,
Right.
they've been in that museum. So what do we say about that?
She showed in Santa Monica, I think in the 90s, but pretty much she is not known to a Southern California audience. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the show, and it was a bit out of the ordinary for me. But I think one thing really interesting is that her message, I think, is very timely for today. Because it is about returning to nature. It is about kind of finding psychic balance. And with all the stuff that's going on in the world, I think that message is very, very timely once again.
I think what happens is we get kind of, as I said before, stuck in our own ways.
Right, exactly.
And we look at things and say, well, that's mall art.
Right.
Or that's like for the masses.
Right.
And does it really matter if it's for the masses or if it's mall art? Or if it has this feeling that you're talking about?
I think it's the inner message that's the most important, you know? And that's a funny thing. It's like, you know, being a curator, I spend my life looking at works of art.
I know.
And it's really fascinating to think about how different works of art function in the world. I mean, different paintings really function differently.
Well, just quote, Big Sur.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you think of the ocean, you think of different you think of kind of paintings that aren't displayed in museum quality galleries.
But
That's
you know,
what I'm. That's
yes, but see, that's the stereotype that people
Exactly.
have. And the thing about Big Sur, which I didn't realize, is that life there is hard. Like Carolyn lives on this amazing property with views that are enviable, but she gets these horrible winds almost constantly.
So they're forcing the forces of nature.
Exactly. So she's very much aware of nature as this elemental primal force. I mean, it's not just picturesque views, and I think that's what drives her art.
So it's something like you had a Chuck Arnaldi show at
Last
the
year,
gallery,
yeah.
but he didn't have to come across any of those things, and yet his paintings are gritty and tough and strong.
Yeah. But you know, that comes from his background. Chuck came from a very, very blue-collar background. I mean, he was a guy who used to, customize his car and work with his hands, and that background is seen in his work. It does come through.
And then another show that you're going to have, we talked about
In January.
California.
Yes.
California people, because Kleefeld is California, and this is Robert Dowd.
Robert Dowd was one of the original LA pop artists. He moved to Los Angeles in 1963, and that year began doing pop art paintings of money. And that was the same year that Andy Warhol showed his Campbell soup cans.
So he did money, he did
Stamps.
but he had art training.
Yes, he studied in Detroit.
So he had the art training. Chuck had the art training.
Right.
So I guess it doesn't really matter if you're self-taught.
Yeah. Actually, Carolyn began her kind of adult creative life as a poet. She met Anais Nin here in LA in the 70s, and they corresponded. And I think through that meeting, Carolyn was encouraged to, write poetry, which she was doing. She always did, but kind of more for herself in journals. But I think through that meeting, Carolyn decided to kind of make this more of a professional, creative thrust in her life. So in the 70s, was writing poetry, and it was in the 80s when she moved to Big Sur, she kind of expanded upon that. So she's really more of a painter-poet rather than an art school painter.
I say, well, it takes an explanation for us to understand and to be aware of what we're looking at.
Right, indeed.
And I thank you so much for coming. I want to show this because it's so Fauves to me,
Isn't that
and
great?
I love that. I
Yeah.
love to be painted like that.
Yeah.
She's great. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Joan. It's been a pleasure.
So keep writing. Email me at jaquinn1@aol.com and keep writing 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 90017. See you next time.